Ellis Ross,
Yes,
you are an MLA.
that's right.
Yeah, you are an elder within your community. You're a former chief councillor.
Not an elder, but yeah, I was a former chief councillor. That's right.
Okay, maybe just by years you're an elder.
Yeah, in my mind.
You are making a difference. You're speaking up. You're instigating change. How do you describe your position?
It's something that I've always fallen into. I've always been requested to get into leadership positions. I never seeked it. I never had an idea that I want to be a leader, I want to be an MLA, or I want to be chief councillor. But the way I explained it was that I had a real deep passion to help people out of horrible situations, mainly poverty. And so that's how I agreed to run for council in the first place. Mind you, when I first was nominated, I kept my name in because I thought I could take some of my council's vast money that they had and divert it to my basketball teams, because I was having a tough time fundraising, only to find out my council had no money. They were broke. They were so broke, they actually owed more money than they actually had coming in. They had no money coming
And you
in.
didn't know this?
I didn't know it.
Really?
And so it was always the idea, because I used my basketball coaching as a way to reach out to kids to say, you shouldn't take this road, you should focus on this, you should do this. And so when I realized that was going on, the council actually opened up my world to, there's a lot of First Nations people that are dealing with this. So that was my fundamental goal, to help people get out of horrible situations.
Well, when you grew up, where'd you grow up, and what did you foresee as your path in life? Which, of course, it may not be the one that you realized, or maybe you envisioned this right from the start.
No, I haven't forevisioned anything.
Yeah.
I was born and raised on a reserve in Kidamai Village, still live there today. And the only thing I could say I had a vision for is that I didn't want to be basically a person that just wandered my village doing drugs every night, because that's what I was doing as a teenager. And so one night I decided not to accept that joint of marijuana, and I decided I wanted to play basketball instead.
Where'd you find that motivation to do that? Because it's not easy to do, especially if you're in a community of friends that you have had for a while. They're going to be like, what? Why not?
Why not smoke drugs and wander the village every night? Mainly what drove it was I was seeing some of the people that had jobs driving by in cars, music playing. They had girls in the cars. They seemed to be having fun. They seemed to be enjoying it. And here I was staying outside my fire hall smoking drugs every night. And I just thought, I'm never going to amount to anything. I'm not going to get off this reserve. So I was trying to think, what could I do then if I'm not going to do drugs? And so I decided I'm going to try to become a basketball player. And so I devoted every day to running the road, doing push-ups, sit-ups. I refused the drugs. And then I became a basketball player.
That could be a little bit lonely to begin with, because you're not a basketball player yet, so you don't get accepted into that environment easily, because you have to be able to perform.
Exactly, and I was uncoordinated. I was skinny. I had no idea what basketball was, but I did it. I became a very good basketball player, and I just kind of took that lesson and I applied it to everything else. It was actually a teacher an English teacher, grade 10, Mr. Milne, and I'd go into class in high school and I'd go to sleep. I was the goof, right? A waste of time.
Really?
Yeah.
It's hard to envision that looking at you now.
Every class. I failed grade 8 math 3 times. Because I'd go in and sleep, right? I wouldn't do homework. But it was Mr. Milne that came in after class one day and said, you're not as dumb as you think you are. If you applied yourself, you do what I tell you, I'm sure you could turn your marks around. So we shook hands, and I did everything you did, and I got an A+ on an essay I turned in. And so little things along the way actually kind of created what I am today.
So it helps when there are people who believe in you.
Yes, without a doubt.
And can give you help. So
yeah.
You graduate from high school then?
Kind of, yeah. Kind of.
Yeah.
I got
you got enough marks that you could say that yeah.
I think they got tired of me. Just said, let's get him out of here.
So what did you do after that? Where'd you go?
I actually worked a bunch of jobs there, odd jobs here and there. I worked for the Department of Fisheries and Ocean for 3 years.
Yeah.
I ran a hand logging business and a construction company with my brothers for a few years. And actually, before I got elected to council, I actually ran a water taxi for a company in town for 11 years. So I did everything I could to actually put food on the table.
And were you still playing basketball at the
time?
Yeah,
definitely.
So you just kept playing basketball
the whole time. I was just recently inducted into the All Native Hall of Fame there last year.
Uh-huh.
I don't play anymore. I can still play, but I'm just too busy.
Huh. So you played basketball, but you also started coaching basketball.
I coached later on. I actually put my own basketball career, for lack of a better word, on hold, and I coached pups for 1 year. I coached junior girls for 10 years. I helped coach the senior women in our village. I coached the intermediate basketball team, men's. I coached the senior men's basketball team for a year. It just basically people requested me to do stuff. So, but it was always done on the principles of discipline, right, and ambition and sacrifice. And so a lot of those, it's interesting because a lot of those kids that I coached back then still remember the things I taught them back then, and it still apply today in terms of drinking, drugs. And now they're family people. They have kids of their own.
There is that First Nations basketball tournament that takes place in Prince Rupert.
Prince Rupert, yeah.
Did you compete in that?
That's where I got inducted into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah?
Yeah.
That's a big tournament.
It's one of the biggest in Aboriginal tournaments in BC.
And how did your teams do?
We were actually, when I was senior men, we were contenders for most of my career.
Wow.
Yeah, we were known as, one of the basketball forces in the region. But by now, though, every other community has taken what we've done and has surpassed us. They've taken on better teaching, better coaching, better everything. But we were known for our fitness and our training.
So it was your motivation to get more money for the basketball team that
didn't
drew
work,
you. What?
That didn't work.
No, because as you said, you went to the bank account and went, there's nothing there.
There's no money.
But you get nominated and you get elected to join council.
Yeah.
What was that process like? Because you had to learn then, okay, how does council work? And how do you go and start to say, okay, this is the structure of all of this and then bring it to a point where you're making a difference on council?
Well, when I was working at a water taxi job at the time, but at the time the chief councillor decided there's too much work for just one person, meaning the chief councillor. So they brought me on as the very first full-time paid councillor.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they paid me $45,000 a year to be a full-time councillor. I was the first.
Yep.
And so, but they didn't give me.
Did that mean that you ultimately had to leave your job with the water taxi company? Because
I had to resign.
Yeah. Okay.
I had to quit.
Yeah.
But they never told me exactly what I should be doing. So I'd go to the office.
You had to make it up.
I had to make it up as I went on. But everything that came through the office, if they didn't want to deal with something, they said, I'll give to Ellis. And it ended up on my desk. And I had to. So during all that, I'd have to deal with putting out all these fires. And then in the meantime, I couldn't figure out the job. Nobody's going to teach me. So I started reading everything I could put my hands on. I read all the case law principles. I read a technical report put out by Bechtel on the feasibility of putting an LNG plant in our reserve down channel. It was a 2-volume report. I couldn't understand a word, but I read it. I actually bought a digital dictionary to kind of help me through everything. And so everything I did, I read the archives. I read everything that came out of provincial government, federal government. I read the Indian Act to a certain extent, which was one of the most boring things I ever read in my life. But I just read and read and read, and I tried to put it all together.
Well, you have to then start to figure out how you're going to interact with the federal government, provincial government, local government. So you have intergovernmental relationships. And you're having to set the framework for what those relationships were going to be for you and then moving forward.
I actually developed a committee. After 8 years in council, I became a chief. And one of the things I developed was a government-to-government working committee. And it was basically put together because I didn't want anybody coming up behind me to actually go through what I went through, learning on my own. So the idea was whoever's on a committee, you follow me around, you read what I read, you go to the meetings, you go to the speeches and all that kind of stuff. And so I wanted to train the next leadership. I still think it's highly valuable because when I first started council, I didn't even know how to get in an airplane. I didn't know that you needed a credit card to check in a hotel. I actually waved at a person sitting on a SkyTrain because I thought he was a conductor. And it was just a passenger. I didn't know that there's so much stuff that you're not taught about. So I really wanted to develop this bit of a program to teach you everything that you need to be an elected leader of a bank council.
Succession planning.
And talk about the nature of the Indian Act, talk about rights and title, talk about treaty negotiations, which we are no longer in, by the way. But I wanted to get the broad principles laid out for leaders so that, we could hit the ground running. If you don't do that, you're probably going to spend the first 2 years of your life just trying to figure out where the bathrooms are.
So in this process of setting the framework and discovering what the responsibilities of the job were, along comes the Northern Gateway Pipeline Project, which you said, this is not right.
Yeah.
And that was a big issue.
Yeah.
And a big issue for you, and probably even bigger for anybody who wanted to develop resources in the area, in saying, we're now going to create the proper kind of framework that will allow for government to industry relations and government to government relations. What was that process like?
It was pretty controversial because I was a councillor when Enbridge first came to town, and I didn't understand it. And we were negotiating the LNG at the time, and I thought it was all the same thing. But bit and bit, when I started to read stuff, I realized, hey, this is bigger. This is crude oil.
Yeah.
And at the time, Prince William Sound was still in the news.
Yes.
And when I became put in charge of our economic development files, and I was sitting down with some of these, not just Enbridge, but there's a bunch of other companies, they were absolutely ignoring what we were saying at the table. I didn't have any opposition to oil in the beginning. I had no opposition to gravel pits, for example. But I did understand, based on what my elders told me, about how companies and government would come into our tables and say, look, we're just here to listen to you. We don't have to do anything. We don't have to actually offer you anything. We're just here to listen to you. So go ahead, complain all you want, and we're going to leave.
And so there's the difference.
I had those lessons.
Yeah.
And I read the archives about how our people were treated. So when I read the Haida court case and I tried to understand it, and these companies were still doing what they were doing, they say, we're going to come in here, we're going to build this project, and by the way, we can't offer you any jobs or contracts, but we want your support. And I tell them, I said, that's not the way consultation and accommodation is supposed to go. I say, well, what if we give you money? It's not about money. Well, what's it going to take? I said, what it's going to take is you got to apply consultation and accommodation. You got to come down and be honorable.
Right.
You got to be meaningful. Mm-hmm. Well, those companies didn't take my advice. And meantime, I'm trying to understand rights and talent case law. I had the same problem with the government. One of the ministers I used to like beating up on was John Rustad.
Oh, yeah.
Now he's my colleague.
Yes,
we're really good friends. But in those cases, sometimes the provincial government would win an argument. Sometimes we would win an argument in terms of a permit. But when I looked at it later on, I said, we're winning all these hollow victories, and yet my people are still on welfare.
Right.
Why am I fighting if I'm not fighting for? And so we changed our approach back in 2009. Mm-hmm. We brought in a lobbyist who taught us about government, taught us about how to communicate and what the role of government is. And so we melded that with our rights and title and our corporate strategies, and that's how the LNG project came to be.
And what a different set of negotiations that was.
Yeah.
And the outcome has been extraordinary.
Yeah. And the strategy that we put in place, I think, is still there today in Haisla.
So what made you say, okay, I'm now going to move on to another jurisdiction and take an elected role in the legislature?
A moment of insanity.
Yeah, but you're a few years into it now.
Yeah.
Do you still think it was a moment of insanity, or as you are gaining an appreciation for the job, can you see the value that you can bring to making change?
Tremendous value.
Yeah.
I never wanted to be on council. I was asked to do it. I never wanted to be chief councillor. I was asked to do it. But the decision for me to run to MLA was when LNG Canada said they were not going to go ahead with their project. They were going to delay it. And that spurred you on then, did it? Yeah, wow. that really depressed me. I mean, 2 weeks before they made that announcement, they gave us the news in Vancouver. They invited us down. We sat in the boardroom. And it was actually Andy Calitz that took me to a side room to break the news to me. And I got hit by a ton of bricks. It just sucked up all the energy out of me. I mean, we were this close to getting a project built. Mm-hmm. And that meant revenues for my community, jobs, contracts, everything. It meant that I was getting away from the Indian Act. And Andy Callis cried in front of me. And he made a commitment to say that, you know what, I'm going to do my best to get this project built and whatnot. And so we went back into the bigger boardroom. And he had his people there. I had my people there. I asked them to leave. And I actually sat down with my people. I just told them. And I dismissed my staff. And I told my council, it's done. It's over.
Uh-huh.
We got nothing.
That's a low point.
And I said, you know what's going to happen in Kitimat? Everything's going to die out. We're not going to see jobs, contracts, activity. We're not going to see anything. So, you know, to advise the rest of you, you should just leave me right now and don't talk to me for the next week because I'm going to be really miserable. And so when the Liberals asked me for a few years to run for them, federal Conservatives have been asking me for run for a few years. I always refused. Never thought it was my position. But at that point, I thought, I got to get to a higher level and see if I can get LNG across the board, finish line here. And that's what spurred my decision.
And so you ran and you defeated an NDP incumbent.
Yeah.
And you won the seat. What's the job look like as an MLA?
It's one of the most complicated jobs I've ever had. It's kind of similar to what I was doing as Chief Councillor, but the objectives seem to be a little bit more unclear. Like as Chief Councillor, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to build the economy. I wanted to help people get jobs and careers and, you know, determine their own futures. MLA is kind of like that, but it's broken up into the legislative side in Victoria, the political side of all these different parties, as well as the service I provide in Terrace and Kitimat in terms of getting people through the governmental systems. It's actually but I do see the similarities in terms of the region wanting their voice heard. They're wanting their riding to be represented well. We want to be put on the map. And that's the same thing I did with Haisla Council. I mean, you know, we got to make sure everybody knows we're here and we got to be there at the table. And I kind of see the similarity there.
There's a lot of travel involved in it too, though, isn't
Tremendous amount of travel.
Is that challenging?
Very challenging because as Chief Councillor, I did a lot of traveling, but I could control it. I could pick and choose. As an MLA, I don't get that luxury. When the legislature is sitting for 11 weeks in the springtime, I've got to be there on a Sunday night for a Monday morning sitting, and I can't leave till Thursday night. And I got to sit in that legislature every day from 8 o'clock till 7 o'clock every night. I'm not allowed to leave to go walk on the lawn.
Right.
I got to stay in there just in case there's a vote. So there's a lot of things that are different for being a chief. You don't control your own time, your own travel, and you've got to do a lot more reading.
Yeah.
A lot more. And then you got to actually understand and comprehend some of this stuff. And I'm lucky because I got 41 other MLAs that have been through it. They understand it. And so they've been teaching me and you know, helping me along here.
So for a young person who's looking at you going, okay, Ellis, you've had like an extraordinary career. Not one that was by design, but by opportunity, not in the sense that you were like seeking it out, but the opportunity to make a difference at a crucial time for yourself, for your community, and now for the province as a whole. I want to be like you. What would you say to somebody who goes, okay, I want to have a career like yours? What would you say would be the key elements to being able to be successful?
One for me is, and I try to tell this to young people, no matter what profession you want to get into, it's going to be a change of life, and it's going to be scary, and but you can't let that fear kind of persuade you not to pursue it. Getting up in front of a camera, getting in front of 500 people, 20 people, 1,000 people, it's pretty scary. But if you let the fear run your life, no matter what you do, you're not going to get anywhere. I mean, everybody's scared when they take a change of direction. Am I doing the right thing? You know, I'm kind of comfortable where I am. I got a good life. I got this. It's predictable. That to venture out to do something else, totally out of your league, totally out of your comfort zone. I mean, I was scared when I left my name in for council. Then I got accustomed to it, realized I could do it. Terrified to run for Chief Councillor. Terrified. But then got into it, understood it. And then as MLA, I was scared of the election, didn't understand what was going on. Then get to MLA, don't understand what's going on. Scared. but it takes some time to actually get relaxed and get accustomed to it. And it's once you get over that fear, you're good. But I'm still scared of some of the stuff I got to do.
What about dealing with the fact that sometimes you say, okay, well, I'm going to do this. You take a chance and it doesn't work, you know?
Pretty embarrassing.
Yeah. But I think that we have to recognize that it's the effort that's more important than whether or not it was a guaranteed success.
So back in the 80s, I was on unemployment insurance, and one of the rules was you had to be actively looking for work, and you had to prove it. And so in high school, they said, you know, apply for every single job you can. You know, doesn't matter what, apply for every single job. So I went and applied for the manpower office at the time, and I didn't know what it was. It just said clerk. And so I went in, and they got me in for an interview, and I knew the lady who was interviewing me, and she knew what was going on. And so I sat down and I said, okay, she put me in front of a typewriter. You're going to type out this document. We want to see how fast you can type this document out. Okay. Never typed anything before in my life, you know. Click. Click. You know, half an hour later, I'm done. One paragraph. Then she puts a stack of envelopes. Okay, file it. How would you file it? Never did it before.
Yeah.
So alphabetically, of course. So, but a lot of files are, you know, have in front of it or the. So that's how I filed it. And it was a complete failure. But it was embarrassing, and we laughed about it. But she commended me on my courage.
Yes.
Right? So you're going to fail, without a doubt. At that time, I realized, and she pointed out to me, hey, if you want to be a clerk, you better go learn how to, you know, type. You better go learn you better take a business management course. You better do this, you better do that. Okay, thanks. I never did, by the way, but
yeah.
The only way you're going to learn is try.
Well, it's effort. I think that we over-celebrate success and underappreciate effort, because effort makes things happen even if the outcome isn't what was perceived to be the immediate objective. We're growing.
Good point.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming in and sharing your amazing career with us.
You're very welcome.